Welcome, book lovers! I'm Rachel Barenbaum, author of the novel Atomic Anna, and you're listening to Check This Out, a series where I interview emerging and diverse authors you may not have discovered yet. A series brought to you by New Hampshire Public Radio and the Howe Library in Hanover, New Hampshire. We have a lot of exciting books and authors coming your way. Next week, we'll talk with librarians to find out their favorite books of 2024, either to give as a gift or read yourself. But today, my guest is Cherry Lu Tsai, and we will be discussing her brand new debut, Love Can't Feed You. This novel is about a Chinese Filipina teenager named Queenie who moved with her brother and father to the U.S. to join her mother, who landed there 5 years earlier. Cherry Lu, welcome to Check This Out. I'm so excited to have you here.
Rachel, I am super excited also. Thank you for having me.
So your beautiful debut novel, Love Can't Feed You, has a very straightforward plot in the sense that it's about a family that moves from the Philippines to the U.S. The mother comes over first. She lands in Brooklyn, New York, and works as a nurse, saving every penny she can to bring the rest of her family over. It's still not enough, so she borrows from a friend, and finally the family is united. Only when Queenie gets to New York, all is not well. The mother has changed, and that's not the only disappointment. New York isn't the glittering gold city that she imagined. The apartment her mother lives in is cramped and filled with things she's taken off the street, not purchased new. Queenie's dream is to go to college, but that's expensive, and soon she finds out she has to work to pay off the debt her mother took on to bring the family to the U.S. in the first place. While that part of the story is straightforward, the relationships within the family are not. And this is the story that really interested me. There are these twisted family connections. There's also an immigration story and Queenie's journey to find herself and a place in the U.S. And I'm really excited to talk about this. But before we start, I want to warn our listeners that we will be talking about scenes that involve domestic violence. If you are experiencing domestic or sexual violence, there is help available 24 hours a day by calling the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. Cherry Lu, let's start with Queenie. We meet her when she's 17 years old. Would you mind reading that opening page for us?
Sure. I am going to die. My body contracts the second the plane descends from 30,000 feet. I feel bile in my throat and grab another vomit bag. I think of the stories others will tell about me. Gone too soon. What a shame that she didn't get to live out her potential. This is not how anyone imagines arriving to America. Papa tells me to pray. My mouth forms Hail Marys, but the monster in my stomach shoves its way to my throat again. The queasiness possesses me with the violence and pins me to my seat as I lurch like the women from back home, the ones who thrash on the ground filled with the Holy Spirit. I should have given you the Dramamine, Papa says for the 10th time since we left Ninoy Aquino International Airport in Manila. Papa didn't let me eat anything he could save for later. The crumbly granola bars, foil-wrapped biscuits, and even the hard dinner rolls. He pocketed the silverware too. He complains to the flight attendant and asks for more vomit bags since I have used mine, his, and even Junior's vomit bags. Junior sleeps soundly on the other side of Papa, his legs akimbo. A white woman next to me turns to her young companion and shakes her head. Her disgust pierces through my nausea. Never have children, she says.
What an opening. That's Queenie for you.
Yeah, so Queenie, her real name is Queen Elizabeth, which seems so weird, but in the Philippines, a lot of families tend to have aspirational names. So something like Queen Elizabeth shouldn't surprise anyone, Queenie, princess.
I want to really dig into her background a little bit. Her father is of Chinese descent, but has a Taiwanese passport. Although she is Filipina, her mother was Filipina. And I understand that is also your background. So can you talk a little about that?
So I like the main character. I am of Chinese and Filipino descent, and I hadn't read any book that I can recall with this similar background, and because of my particular background being mixed, even though in the United States I'm just considered Asian. There was a box, just Asian. But in the Philippines, I had this experience of being othered already because of my Chinese surname. I'm fairer than other Filipinos. I mean, except for those that we see in Miss Universe pageants or something like that, you know. Um, and I had also was at the receiving end of a lot of prejudice from fellow Filipinos who would say to me things like, and I was a kid. They would say things like, "Your people stole money from our people," you know. So already having that type of awareness that, oh, I'm different. And even though my dad's family was very wealthy, but my father himself was not, and also the black sheep of the family. So, and I don't think it was good that he married outside of the race or what have you. That was frowned upon. They were very insular at that point. So the laws of birthright and citizenship are different in the Philippines than in the United States. So in the United States, you are born in the United States, you automatically become an American citizen. But in the Philippines and other parts of the world, this is not the case. You take on the citizenship of your parents. So my grandparents are Chinese from China, immigrated to the Philippines. First, it was my grandfather, then it was my grandmother who followed him, I think, after a year, and she had a 2-year-old daughter, my aunt in tow. And then they never surrendered their Taiwanese passports given to them by the new Taiwanese government. And so all their children had Taiwanese passports. My father had to choose between being naturalized as a Filipino citizen and keeping the Taiwanese passport. So he became a naturalized Filipino citizen when he was 35 years old. So technically, all most of his adult life, he was considered an other, a foreigner, like even by passport, although he was born and raised in the Philippines. And he did not speak Chinese, really. Like, he understood a little bit, but did not speak it well.
And I understand you haven't been back to the Philippines since you left,
Yes, I have not been back. It is very strange.
but you have been to China.
I had been to China, yes, when I was in college, one time only. This might sound weird, but I think there was always this longing eh, to go back to a country you've never been to. To go back to China, just to see, just because all my young life I was told you're Chinese. So there was, I guess, a curiosity and the longing for that place that supposedly this is where your grandparents had come from. And it was interesting because then the Chinese I met there, they thought I was half white Chinese because I apparently did not look at that time anyway, did not look like a typical Chinese because my eyes are bigger. I'm a little bit swarthier, I have a bigger frame than a lot of them. But then let me tell you something. When I came here originally, I was what, 13, and then as a 15-year-old, I was in high school, Lafayette High School in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn, and there were a lot of Chinese people, also immigrants or those who were born here or raised here. And there was a 17-year-old, he found out that he's Chinese. He found out that I had liked this other Chinese boy. And then he made a comment to me that I will never forget. He said that, "Why do you like this Chinese guy? You should like your own kind." It was very existential for me because I thought, "Well, what is my kind?" Like, if the Filipino side, some of them already consider me an other, and then this Chinese side, who I thought I was always part of, actually is telling me, "Well, you're not Chinese because you don't look Chinese, you don't act Chinese, you don't talk all the markers, you're not, and so it made me feel like, okay, I belong to neither. So what is this space in which me and my kind, whatever that is, exists?
And then you come to America and you're just a monolith of Asian.
Yes, yes. And so suddenly the barriers of all these different ethnic Asians are gone. And then, you're in a checkbox Asian, and so So that was, such a shock to the system. I was also thinking, "Wait, Indians are also Asian?" You know, because in the Philippines, they're considered like another race, you know? Um, the Arabs, apparently Western Asia, that's also a thing. They're Asian too because they're part of Asia. So it's just it was a very big eye opener, coming to the country. So I wanted to reflect part of that in Queenie's observation, I guess.
Yeah, I was just about to ask, that was my next question. It felt like you just channeled all of that surprise and shock into Queenie, into your debut novel.
I mean, ultimately, I feel that I did write the book for a younger version of me saying, "Girl, this is how it is, so don't be too shocked." You know?
If you're just joining me, I'm Rachel Barenbaum. You're listening to Check This Out, coming to you from NHPR. My guest today is Cherry Lu Sai, and we are talking about her brand new debut, Love Can't Feed You. Cherry Lou, in this novel, there are some dark places that you go to, and you don't shy away from them, which is one thing that I really, really loved and admired. And one of them is domestic violence. And there's some hard scenes, and you made some choices. And I was wondering if you could talk to us, tell us about how you wrote those scenes. I'm sure it was really hard, and how you made those come onto the page.
Yeah, I mean, I will say as part of a caveat, I guess, that some people have thought that this book is about my memoir. Like, I've had to correct people, and I take that as a compliment. And I will say that part of the book is taken from things that had happened in my life. So part of it also is the domestic violence. My father, I mean, I loved him, but he was a very flawed man, and I had seen touches of violence before. So my parents had divorced, and when I was growing up, I had seen my father threaten my mother, not just my mother, but other people. And like he had never chased my mom with a knife, right? Like in the book, but he had done that to my aunt. I had seen that. Um so and my aunt that time had ran to a room, and I'm so glad actually that she was able to run to the room and lock the door because he started kicking down that door. And I'm so glad that the door was a very tough door, because I don't know what would have happened had he gotten his hands on her. And like I often ask myself the question of legacy, um because when you see domestic violence, when you see certain things that are normalized, there is a question of how much of that is you. I think for me personally, there was a lot of shame around who my father was because um, he was not someone that I could be proud of. My father was not like that, and when he died, actually, I had to think about, well, what was my father's legacy to me, and all I could really think of and all I could really treasure was his legacy of, my love for reading and sorry, and, and that he believed that I could write and that he had told me, "If you wanna be a writer, go for it." And he was the only person who had done that, and I needed that, especially coming from an Asian household. Um, Most Asians, they want their children to become somebody. When I mean somebody, it means doctor, lawyer, someone who can make money, someone who can provide. But I wanted to be a writer. Writers provide stories. Sorry.
Don't apologize. I mean, it's a beautiful thing that he said, but he had this other hard side that must have been really difficult for you, and then to put that into the book must have been a really hard thing, a very brave thing for you to do.
Yeah, I guess it was my way to wrap it up with him. Think about, well, what is your legacy to me, father?
Would you want him to read that scene that you wrote?
Yeah, if you were still alive. I mean, partly, this book was written the way how it is so that he would be able to read it, because when he was still alive and I was writing, I invited him to see a presentation of one of my plays. It was a very long scene. My siblings came. I have an older sister and two younger brothers, and they understood what I was trying to do. Whatever they know that I'm just weird, right, and that I do experimental writing and all of that. My father, he was laughing, and I thought, "Oh, he gets it." But then later when I talked to him, we were in the subway, he said, I didn't get it. I don't understand anything." And he was just like he didn't understand what I was trying to do. And I think when he died, I really examined why I was doing experimental writing, why I wrote the way how I wrote, which is I wrote a lot of absurdities. I was using a lot of post-structuralist theory and realized, oh, my father can't read this, and if he if he were still alive, I need to write something that he could understand. You know that this is not like how I write usually this novel. Um, because as you said, it's pretty straightforward, right? I don't write like that, and It it's because of this compulsion to make him understand, like, I wanted him to read it and say, "You did good, like, I understand this."
I didn't know him, but I think he would have said that. It's a beautiful novel. Did he ever apologize for the violence, or do you think he would have if he had read that?
I don't know, he was a very proud man and, very stubborn, and the way how he, viewed life is that he did the things he had to do, whatever they were. So, yeah, it's like I have a complicated, ha relationship with my dad. Like, I appreciate that he supported, my dream of becoming a writer, but at the same time, he was who he was, and who he was, sometimes it was very shameful for me.
But you didn't flinch from putting a character like him on the page in this novel. That was brave. You should be really proud of that.
Yeah, yeah.
You're listening to Check This Out from NHPR. I'm Rachel Barenbaum. My guest today is Cherry Lu Tsai, and we're talking about her brand new debut novel, Love Can't Feed You. And you're listening to Check This Out from NHPR. Cherry Lou, we were talking about your experience coming to the US, and what it felt like when you were thrown into this box Asian, right? When in fact you are Chinese, Filipino, there's a lot more nuance to it. And you really channel that into your main character, Queenie. So let's go back to Queenie. When she gets to America, it's a shock. She feels like she doesn't fit in. Can you tell us about how she's feeling, what she's seeing?
Sure, she ends up in Sunset Park, so there's that griminess that she and her family, of course, did not expect because it's not the Hollywood version, right? It's not Friends from from TV or anything like that. So there's that shock at being at the in the space that you've always thought would look or feel a certain way and that you would exist in it, but then you realize that, oh, it's not that great actually. And so I just wanted to have a book where there seems to be a suspension of, well, what is happiness? What is assimilation? What are all of these things when life is happening in a place where some people don't want you there, and you may not even want yourself to be there.
And you really show us that this sort of shattering of this dream that she had of what America was, when we see her mother right away. So Queenie hasn't seen her mom in 5 years, and right away she thinks, "This is not the woman I remember."
Right.
Queenie's mom is a nurse, and she is working in a hospital, but she's wearing makeup and looks different. She carries herself differently, right? Her shoulders are squared. She sort of has this glamorized element to her that Queenie doesn't remember. Even when she starts talking, she's like, "This is just not the mom that I remembered." And there's this shock and a sort of sadness that hits her. And so talk a little bit about her feelings, Queenie's, when she gets there.
So, and again, oftentimes this is true of my experience and true of others that I have talked to or read about, that because of just being apart from your parent, there is that strangeness that comes when you first meet again, after such a long period of time, because essentially you're strangers. You don't know how they look without the makeup or with makeup, all of that. They smell different, just these little things. And then there's a line actually in the book where the laundromat owner, Mr. Park, says to Queenie's dad that the land shapes you, and so I feel like strongly that that's true, that the land where we exist shapes us so much. And so because Queenie's mother has had to work, she's by herself, she's working, she's trying to figure out, how do I bring my family over? I mean, you have to develop a certain type of gumption, and so she's become more aggressive, more confident in her ability to do what needs to be done in order to get things done. So you remember someone who's different from that, and then you're just thinking, this is a completely different person. I don't know her.
There's also a lot around language in this book. At home in the Philippines, she speaks Tagalog. In America, it's English. People are surprised she doesn't speak Chinese, any dialect in Chinese. Talk to me about language in this book and how that's also a shock and a barrier for her.
Language is very important because language is also a key to identity, right? It's when you come to a place and then you don't have that shared language, there is already a barrier because people feel like, oh, you're not one of us. You can't access us, and we can't access you. And I oftentimes hear that also in a lot of, let's say, racialized incidents where people will say that speak English, and so they'll ask you questions like, where are you from? But where are you really from? So that's typical, I feel.
Right. The other classic question, of course, being, "What are you?"
Yes, yes, exactly, exactly.
Which Queenie gets in the book. And I love how she dissects that or sort of sits with that question, "What am I?" Right? She's human. She's human and she's trying to find her place.
Right.
Cherry Lou, we are really digging into some of the big themes and ideas here in this novel. Your main character, Queenie, arrives in the United States from the Philippines, and she is thrown into a grittier America than she had imagined. And another layer of shock to her is the relationship between her parents. So we have her father, who is actually 20 years older than her mother. And I sort of got the feeling that she didn't think too much about that because she was so young when she lived in the Philippines when they were together. But when she gets to the US, she's a little bit older, she's 17, and this age difference really stands out. So, can you tell us a little bit about that relationship between her parents?
I don't know if I should even call it a romance because we find out from the mom that she never even really loved the father. It was because she thought he had money. And uh in the Philippines there is this stereotype that Chinese people are very wealthy, and so the the mom thinks that before, right? Because she came from a very impoverished family, and that uh, her mom had passed, she had her father to think about and her education, and she ended up working as a call girl, in Olongapo City, which was one of the American base where the American base was before. And that's where she met the father. and they had relations. She got pregnant, and then she thought, "Yes, this is my ticket out," right? And then she finds out, "Oh, no, this is not the ticket out." And because she didn't choose love, right? She chose money. Um, and to find out that the choice was actually not to her benefit, right? And so that also could have hardened the mom.
There's a lot of regret there. But also, every time they get into a fight, the dad comes back to when he met her, she was a prostitute, and right, so it's sort of another he puts her down again and again, even though she's the one making the money. She's the one that saved the family and saved him.
Yeah, I think, and also this dynamic I feel is typical in a lot of the old countries because of, well, patriarchy. There is this expectation that the woman should be demure, very demure. And when it's flipped, when the woman is not acting out the role that she's supposed to do, then she's a bad woman, right? And then the father also says that, "Where did I pick you up from? You were nothing before me, and that you transformed because I picked you up from nothing, whatever, And um so having that dynamic broken up because now the mom is making her own money, right? And not only is she making her own money, she's providing for this man who may have helped her in the beginning when she didn't know as much because when she had met the man, she was very, very young. She was still practically in her teens. And then now he's re-encountering the father is re-encountering his wife as a full-grown woman, and that's tough, new country, a new person, and then you have kids who are going to like everything is brand new. That's very stressful. So it's stressful for the kids, but also stressful for the adult, I guess, from the father's side, the one who is coming in super dependent and then not being able to rely on old means of survival, because in the Philippines, we would have had connections with people, but he's used to being his own boss. He was a businessman, and then now, oh, okay, okay, you're gonna work as a cleaner in a building because that's that's what you can do.
Right, he's a part-time janitor.
Yeah.
Not happy about it. And in the midst of this, right, as the parents are struggling to come to terms with their relationship, figure out who they are, we have Queenie is also trying to grow up. She's right on the edge. She's 17, and she's also sort of trying to figure out her own sexuality. I thought it was really interesting, right, because we know this history of her mother that she was a prostitute at one time. Now she's a nurse, right? She is the one who saved the family and earning the money. Her father used to be the one who was sort of the one holding the family up, and now he's fallen. And she's trying to figure out where does she come out in all of this? What kind of woman is Queenie going to be? So, she starts exploring that both sexually, like her sexuality, but also her, like, can I even go to college? So, talk to us a little bit about how she's struggling with how she fits there.
So for Queenie, just existing in a new place with new ways of being, right, that she was not exposed to before. I mean, then there's that experimentation that happens oftentimes with young people thinking, okay, what can I do? What do I fall back on? And also this is the other thing. When I was writing, I kept thinking, okay, is Queenie going to try to see if she is just like her mom, right? Because people kept saying, "You're like your mom." You're like, so what does that mean when you're like, are you like the mother who was a prostitute, or are you like the mother who is a nurse? You think, well, which part is the part that's in me? Am I the bad one or the good one?
I love that. If you're just joining us, I'm Rachel Barenbaum. My guest today is Cherry Lou Tsai, and you're listening to Check This Out from New Hampshire Public Radio. We're talking about Cherry Lou Tsai's brand new novel, Love Can't Feed You. And we are digging into this theme of what am I, that Queenie asks, And it's not the race-related "what am I" that we discussed earlier, it's the "what am I" in terms of, in the future, what will I be? Am I my mother's nursing life, the side that was successful and became a nurse, the side that scrabbled as a prostitute to survive, or am I my father? Am I the good side, the bad side? I love that question because I think it's really universal, and it's one of those questions that everyone thinks about when they're on that edge of growing up. Which pieces of my past am I going to bring forward with me? And do we have a choice? I don't know that we have a choice what we bring forward.
I feel like this is the eternal question, right? Is it really written out, right? Or do we have free will? Or do we get to that written part eventually, even though we fight against it?
This conversation is amazing because it is really the heart of a coming of age novel. This is exactly what Queenie is thinking too, right? This you really channeled that into the book, into your debut, Love Can't Feed You, where you're asking, is my future already written? Do I have a choice? Can I find my way in this new country? I mean, that is the heart of Queenie and what's happening. And I thought you used a brilliant symbol for all of this. We have to go here. We're gonna talk about the snake, right? The molting snake. So tell me about the snake and what it means in the book.
The cover, which is by the brilliant Dominic Jones, it features a snake. Okay, there is a snake in the novel. So her best friend ends up with a guy, like of means, who has a pet snake, and then Jan, her best friend, has to take care of the snake, and then when things kind of fall apart in Queenie's house, she ends up staying with Jan and the snake and discovers things about the snake, and then they watch the snake molt. And molting is about removal of the skin, and it is a process. It's a process that happens every now and then for the snake to grow because it's encased in its old skin. And so the old skin no longer serves the purpose of the body because the body's now growing bigger. And so it molts. And so, yes, I was actually waiting for someone to ask me about the snake and the molting like all this time since the book came out. Nobody has yet asked me about it. You are the first, Rachel. So great.
I can't believe that. I mean, this is really a big part of the book, I thought, right? A huge symbol.
Yeah, so I know nothing about snakes. I had to do a lot of research and deep diving into snakes. It is a fascinating universe, and part of the reason I chose the snake is because of this idea from the Garden of Eve, the snake, the temptation of the snake in the garden for Eve, that is for her to eat the apple, the tree of knowledge. And so I thought, okay, I want an object to contain that idea, and that's why I ended up with the snake. Because here the fruit of knowledge is for her to become someone of her choice, whatever that is, and a reflection basically of how in order for us to grow, we do need to shed the skin. We need to grow into our faces. We need to grow into ourselves, whoever that self becomes.
I loved the snake. I loved the image. I thought it was really strong, and there was a lot wrapped up in it, if you will. I'm Rachel Barenbaum. You're listening to Check This Out from NHPR. My guest today is Cherry Lusai, and we are talking about her debut novel, Love Can't Feed You. Cherry Lou, one of the really big things that you have woven throughout this beautiful book is a lot of folklore. There's a lot of myth. There are a lot of other stories within the story coming from, I feel like, deep Filipino folklore in here. Can you talk about that and how you wove that in?
Sure. It was very important for me actually to put in some of the folklore just because the Philippines it's a colonized country. It's been colonized first by Spain for over 300 years, then Japan for a little bit, and then the United States. And so I don't think that Filipinos know a lot of the past just from the impression that I got because even for me, a lot of the folk tales, I had to research them, except for the one with the nose, because the one with the nose, I had heard that, and then I had seen that a number of times in different incarnations because of that's the nature of oral stories. It's not because it's not written down, it changes through transmission. So, something about storytelling also interests me, how it changes depending on who is telling the story. So so that was important for me to have something like a story within a story, if that makes sense.
And what languages do you speak?
I speak English, obviously Tagalog. Unfortunately, I do not know Chinese because my dad didn't know himself, and then we were never in Chinese school. And when I tried in college, I think I was made to feel ashamed actually that I didn't know Chinese, that I didn't pursue it. I don't know, again, not making I had people, for example, in, restaurants who would say has said to me things like, "Why don't you know Chinese? You should be ashamed of yourself," and it made it hard. Um, obviously a little Spanish and French from school, and then I'm married to someone from Ukraine, and I lived in Ukraine for a year, so I actually speak a little bit of Russian. I was in, Kiev for a year. This is sad, but I know more Russian than Chinese.
Cherry Lou, I want to move into the writer's life and talk to you a little bit about your background because I understand that you are a playwright first, and novelist, right, is newer to you. So talk about that. Tell us about your playwriting life.
Yes, I started out first, trying to act, but then I didn't really have roles for me, and thought, "Okay, then I'll try to create a role for myself." So I wrote a solo I was trying to write a solo play. I never debuted that, and then ended up writing plays anyway. Then I stopped writing for a bit because life gets hard and you need money, so I was working, odd jobs. And then I got into prose writing more, but it wasn't working out until I would say started writing seriously more during the pandemic. It was right after I graduated. I didn't know what to do with my life, and Zoom theater just not working. So I was working on what would become Love Can't Feed You. And my friend had passed away. She was the one who was trying to get me to write more prose, actually. She's a writer. And I was grieving her, right? And then at the end of 2020, my dad passed away. And so I was grieving both of them at the same time. And then I decided that the vehicle for a lot of the grief I was experiencing, grief through not being able to watch theater anymore, do theater because of Zoom, and also the death of both of one of my close friends and my father. I channeled all that through writing Love Can't Feed You.
I'm really sorry to hear about your loss. That must have been really difficult, but maybe also, it felt good to be able to sit down and channel that into the novel.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. With my friend, her name was Kimberly Nguyen. She, she, she was such a great writer, brilliant. So I was also reading all of that, and I felt like when I was working on my book, that I was finding her. I don't know if that makes sense. That in the act of writing, because I felt like I didn't have the discipline, which she had. She had it in spades, and she was, trying to tell me, "Okay, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to print this out," and, so I could hear her partially in my head as I was trying to figure out what to do, because writing a novel, you need a lot of discipline, you need a lot of mistakes, I guess, in the writing process and trying to find the path of the story.
If you're just joining us, I'm Rachel Barenbaum. My guest today is Terry Lou Tsai, and you're listening to Check This Out from New Hampshire Public Radio. We're talking about Terry Lou Tsai's brand new novel, Love Can't Feed You. You've been very open about needing to work odd jobs, right? Because being an artist, writer is hard. Uh, so, talk a little bit about that for all of the new and aspiring writers listening to this show. What is that like?
It is not easy and not for the faint of heart. But yeah, you need something that will allow you, I guess, time to write. And this is maybe the opposite of what I heard as advice when I was trying to be a playwright. So I remember one artistic director that time that we had workshop with. And what did he say? Which is again the complete opposite. He said, because this is hard, this must be the only thing that you really, really want to do. And don't give yourself a safety net. You know, it's completely opposite advice, which is what I was doing before that I don't really have a safety net. This is like do or die, you know? And it is rough. It is rough, rough, rough.
I've had a lot of writers on this show, and almost everyone has a day job. And almost everyone is writing at night, waking up early in the morning, right? Because it is a long journey and you're not going to get paid for a long time. And then when you do get paid, it's not going to be enough to make up for all that time, right? That you spent.
Yeah, if you wanna make it easier, yes, do, day job. If you are silly like me, you will not. Yeah, like, right now, I'm in between, and it's rough. It is rough.
How long did it take you to write your beautiful debut novel, Love Can't Feed You?
So I started around 2019. That was after I graduated from my playwriting MFA program, which is strange maybe for people. Because I didn't write plays, I started writing a novel, and then if I consider from when I sold it, I sold the book at the end of 22, you know, so 4 years, but then from conception to publication, 6 years, you know, this year.
Wow, it is a long journey.
It is. And actually my during the book launch, I told people that I almost quit writing and thought that maybe I'll not be a nurse, but I'll be a coder, you know, so because I just needed something. I felt like, "Oh, writing hates me." Like, this is, like, 6 months before I sold the novel. And I actually started to take a class, but yeah, I almost drove myself crazy trying to learn coding. And thank God that I sold my book because it gave me like an out to say, okay, maybe I have to focus on writing my novel instead of learning how to code.
So were you thinking about coding, because of so many rejections?
Yeah, I felt like maybe writing isn't for me. Maybe writing just hates me. To also in playwriting, I've never been produced yet, and I was like always a finalist for something, and I just felt like, oh God, this is the sound of inevitability.
Well, I'm glad you stuck with it. I think your bio even says that you've been a finalist for many, many things,
Yeah.
right? That is the writing life. So, we're sort of going around this topic, but I wanna ask you directly, what advice do you have for new writers?
This must be something that you absolutely, absolutely have to do because it is very, very difficult and you need to maintain a discipline to it.
How did you find your agent?
They found me actually.
What? That never happens.
Yes, so they were new agents from Transatlantic. There were two of them, Laura Cameron and Amanda Orozco. At the time when they had found me, they were fairly new. So newer agents, usually they're really looking to expand their rosters. So I took the Catapult novel generator class because, of course, I didn't have the discipline to be writing and shaping a novel, right? So I had done that. And at the end of it, I was asked if I wanted to have an excerpt and to read it out loud, you know, recorded. And so I recorded, 3 pages. And they had both heard it. So they contacted me, asked for the book, and pretty much after talking, they offered representation. And at that time, I said, "Oh, let me wait for these other agents that I had queried." And had two people ghost me, two agents, so then one agent had to revise and resubmit because she was really interested, but she would only represent me if I had changed X, Y, and Z. And I agreed with her changes. But at that point in time, I felt like I needed validation. And so I went with the people who believed me from the get-go, you know? And I figured that if they love it now, they're gonna still love it later, and they're gonna fight for me, you know? So that's how I thought about it, and here we are.
Terry Lou, we're talking about your debut novel, Love Can't Feed You. For me, it was very much a coming of age story, but it was also a family story. What do you want your readers to think about when they finish this novel, when they put this book down?
I think that I want the readers to think about their own coming of age and the possibilities that could have come out because of choices, right? So when we're at a point growing up, there's always that time when you could have the sliding doors moment of whether you could have gone in or out. And so I just want folks to think about what choices they've made in order to get to where they are. Is there regret there? And also, life is just lifing, and what what can you do when faced with certain odds? How do you come across without getting hurt?
Or maybe getting hurt is part of it.
Actually, yes, there is no growth without pain.
Terry Lusai, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure. It's been an incredible conversation. Thank you for opening up and sharing so much and for sharing this beautiful debut, Love Can't Feed You.
I just thank you for asking the questions that you've been asking, and because it means that you've read it well, and that you've taken the time to think about it, and I really appreciate that because like I said, I never know how it's gonna land and whether it's gonna make sense or be even important or, any of that because it's just a story.
But it's a lot more than a story, and that's why we read, and that's why this is a beautiful book. Love Can't Feed You by Cherry Lusai.
Thanks so much, Rachel. I really appreciate it.
If you are experiencing domestic or sexual violence, there is help available 24 hours a day by calling the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. You've been listening to Check This Out, where we dive deeply into the works of emerging and diverse authors you may not have discovered yet. This conversation is a partnership between New Hampshire Public Radio and the Howe Library in Hanover, New Hampshire. I'll be back next week. We'll talk with librarians to find out their favorite books of 2024, either to give as a gift or read yourself. Make sure to check it out. Our producer today is NHPR's Jessica Hunt. The Howe Library Director is Ruby Simon. NHPR's Program Director is Emily Quirk. The show is sponsored by CNS Wholesale Grocers Family of Companies, the Jack and Dorothy Byrne Foundation, and the Howe Library Corporation. Thanks so much for listening. See you next time.